Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio, Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot of on the agenda, Dr. Lopkin, a lot really, again, focuses on our esteemed president, which, before we get into the whole agenda, do you think it's people's imagination, or what's your read? Is he really digressing mentally as day by day, or what?
He does seem to be getting worse. When he makes a speech, now he's made a couple of speeches over the past few days, one down in Atlanta, the January 6th, where despite the content, he actually did manage to seem presidential. So he can be coached to perform. However, as soon as somebody starts asking him questions, as soon as he goes off script, he's lost it.
Oh, yeah, that happened in Georgia when he was on script.
Yes.
You might not agree with what he was saying. I certainly don't. As soon as he starts doing some riffs, it just goes south real quick. But we'll redouble on that. Just kind of an opening thought. So speaking of opening thoughts, and maybe she doesn't have a lot of them, and that's AOC, again, as any good socialist, just like Nancy Pelosi, and we'll talk about that in a second, is do as I say, not as I do, mass, triple, 10 mass maybe, might not be enough. And she's out in some kind of a transgender get together in Florida, which all the liberals are flocking to because there's freedom there. She's now tested positive for COVID, and I guess she's so irresistible, so sexy, that even the COVID virus could not help but be with her, correct?
That's it. That's the truth, is that the COVID virus wants to date AOC. And of course, she couldn't turn that down. But no, and he is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, AOC is another one who really has no clue about reality. She is stuck in this agenda that we've seen over and over again in country after country fail miserably. And yet, she's like, oh no, this is great. However, just do what I say, don't do what I do. She's complaining, she can't afford her student loan debt, but she can afford to drive a Tesla.
I find it very hard to believe that she can't afford her student loan debt as being a congressperson. And if you can't afford the school, then don't go to one of the most expensive schools in the country. Be you. There you go. I know that's a genius thought, but you may want to contemplate that before you rack up hundreds of thousands. But that's just a political thing. She can easily pay off. She could start a GoFundMe page. How does that sound? So speaking of do as I say, not as I do, Nancy Pelosi, the esteemed socialist, open borders, senile nutcase. Yes, we all must share the wealth, and corporations need to pay more. Just by chance, she racked up and had a windfall of over $30 million. Just so happens the stock that her husband traded in was related to legislative agendas. That's just pure coincidence, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
Of course. If somebody in the corporate world had done this, it would have been labeled insider trading immediately. The SEC would have Right. The SEC would have filed charges. There would have been jail time. Yes, Martha Stewart is the perfect example.
For a lot less.
Because she is Speaker of the House and, she's a politician. It's okay for us to do this. And
yeah, but how about the mixed message? The big socialist, yes, socialism is, again, as long as it pertains to you and I. She went into Congress. She was relatively affluent, not really overwhelmingly, and now she's worth what, $300 million?
Something like
a banana republic.
But you're talking about the socialists. I'm actually going to give the socialists credit where credit is due. the squad has been going after her and saying they need to change the rules to make that illegal for Congress. It's the only thing I've ever heard them say that makes any sense.
Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Exactly.
Speaking of a broken clock, I have two broken clock things on the itinerary, and that is Kamala Harris. This really does piss me off. You have someone, and by the way, it's not like a truck driver or a middle manager. She's a vice president of the United States. So totally incompetent, has screwed up everything she's touched. Not even screwed up, has so lazy, hasn't done jack shit for anything that she's assigned to. Went to the border, well, within 300 miles of the border. Basically, obviously, have done nothing. So what did she do? Blame the race card. I mean, how, first of all, how reflective is that of her personality? Plus, she has a responsibility to unite. That's what they ran on, the great uniters. They've been the most divisive administration since Obama. But it's just good moral character I'm sure you've faced or you've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. But I look myself in the mirror and say, Jeff, you kind of screwed that one up. I don't blame because I'm too tall, too short, whatever. Your comments.
Yeah, the claim that people are harder on her because of her race and gender is absolutely ridiculous. First of all, it was her race and gender that got her the position in the first place. So
without a doubt,
she's already used that to her advantage. But second of all, yes, the media has been criticizing her. Certainly the pundits have been criticizing her. But most of the criticism, especially from the liberal media, has been coming from people inside her office. So you're telling me that she hired racists because they're the ones providing the information and the complaints. As it turns out, Kamala Harris was not ready for prime time.
She's never been ready for prime time.
Right.
Never been ready.
According to the people in her office, she does not do the research. She does not prepare for media events. She does not go over the briefings on the issues. Now, there were some complaints that Trump did the same thing, and the media went off. Was it race-related then? No, of course not. You've got the same complaints about Harris that they leveled against Trump, but in her case, it's because of her race and gender. No, it's because she is incompetent.
No question. But just to elaborate, I agree with you 100%, by the way, obviously, but also to elaborate a bit, it's not just her as vice president. Her whole life has been about checking the boxes or about, being connected with Willie Brown, literally and figuratively. But she's never had gravel in her gut. She's never had to dig it out. She's had a free ride. She was an ineffective senator, a crappy candidate, and she's a shitty vice president. It's called a trifecta.
Yeah, her fellow Democrats have pointed out the fact that she has never had to work for a position. She was handed the district attorney position. She was handed the Senate position. She never really had to campaign for these. She never built up a rapport with her constituents. And now she's facing the backlash of that because she does not have that audience that's in her corner. She's never put in the work. It's always been handed to her. She's literally the definition of somebody who was born on third base and thought she hit a triple.
Exactly. I thought that ended with George H.W. Bush, but it hasn't. Now, we've talked about this before, but sometimes things are just so unbelievable. Literally, Ripley's Believe It or Not. And we've talked about CNN's plummeting ratings, so has MSNBC. But losing 88% of your viewers I mean, you're talking like you said to me before we went on air that, cable access is close to that. I mean, this is the epitome of incompetency. Zucker should not be fired. He should be sent to Siberia, like re-education camp or something. My God, what a bonehead. How do you do that? How do you take CNN, the leader in news 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and turn it into a shit show?
It is absolutely amazing how far CNN has fallen. And you and I have used this example before, but all I keep thinking of is the 1962 Mets. And when Casey Stengel was asked how did they lose all those games, he said it was a team effort. Well, that's what happened at CNN. The failure of the network is amazing because even the diehard liberals have turned their back on the network because they're saying, you know what? This is just not true. These are not fact. And MSNBC is starting to see the same thing. There was an uprising of viewers against Rachel Maddow because they were complaining. Maddow said if we got vaccinated, that was going to protect us from the virus. Now it turns out that's not true. And they're like, so all of the things that the liberal pundits have been telling us isn't true. We're going to stop watching. And you're seeing the ratings plummeting. CNN is topping out now at 687,000 viewers. For a national network, that is ridiculous. Local channels get more viewers than that.
Totally amazing. I think you have a really good point. And I just want to bounce this off you. Someone who's been in the newspaper business and communications now. I think, and this is what I believe, that with Trump, they thought they could just throw shit against the wall, everything stuck. But then they went a bridge too far, lie after lie after lie. They lost their credibility. People don't trust them. And I think their audience has left them. That's not profound. That's I think, a matter of fact. The other factor is, if you look at CNN, I'd rather watch my cats do calisthenics. I mean, it is unwatchable, your comments. I mean, Anderson Cooper, I love him. Mr. Erudite with the glasses. He's like the shittiest interviewer. Talk about cable access. I've seen things on Avon Cable Access TV that are better interviewers than that.
Yeah, no, CNN has problems with their on-air content because they pegged everything to going after Trump. And now they can't just do that because Trump's out of the spotlight, except in the heads of the diehard liberals, where he seems to live in perpetuity. But now all of the facts are coming out. The Steele dossier that CNN pushed was fake. The Wuhan lab leak theory is plausible. Everything they pushed back, oh my God, it's lie. It's like all turned out to be true. And you're not just seeing it at CNN. CNN happens to be the most visible example of it, but you're seeing MSNBC's ratings drop. You're seeing all of the late night talk show hosts' ratings drop because
except for Gutfeld.
Yes, except for Gutfeld on Fox News, who is the number one late night host. You're seeing all of these people going, you know what? Enough is enough. You've been lying to us for 5 years now. We don't trust you. You're not that funny. And you have Bill Maher. Bill Maher has been going after these guys over and over again, telling them, you have to stop this. You're just hurting yourself. Bill Maher just gave an interview, and it might have actually been in his book, I'm not sure, but it came out in an interview where he was saying he would rather perform at colleges in red states because those people are ready for comedy. Whereas colleges in blue states, they're offended by everything. They want everything canceled. So you've got very liberal comedians pushing back on cancel culture, pushing back on what CNN has been doing. So they don't even have their traditional audience anymore. So they, at this point, I think CNN really needs to just clean house, fire everybody, bring in new people. Because aside from the content problem, which is what we've been talking about, they've got all these behind the scenes problems. Don Lemon's been accused of sexual harassment. You have the Chris Cuomo with his sexual harassment and what he did with Andrew. You had Jake Tapper's producer and another producer accused of pedophilia. This is what was going on behind the scenes at CNN. So, yeah, CNN just needs to fire everybody and start over.
Yeah, real quick, not to belay, we want to move on and certainly don't want to spend too much time on CNN. What I think is overall that sometimes you can have a really shitty team in a bad division and they can do well, or have a mediocre middle manager when sales are great because of a new product just came out. That's what CNN and MSNBC is. Let's speak really focus more on CNN. When it was anti-Trump and all the liberal whack jobs out there were just, flossing at the mouth over this, you could have shitty deliverables, meaning you have Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper, Cuomo, and it suffices. But then when that evaporates and that hysteria is gone, now you're left with basically the emperor has no clothes, the man behind the curtain. Now you're just looking at shitty content and shitty on-air personalities. So there you go. Exactly. I do believe 100%.
Yeah, they basically used the Trump administration to supercharge their ratings and, hide all of the flaws. Now that they don't have that, you're seeing them for what they are.
No question. Okay, moving on. And there should be, I agree with you, not just trimming around the edges. It needs to be a wholesale, just everyone goes. Again, when we look at CNN and they were talking about all the nut jobs, the Trumpers, and all the unwashed masses, and how the conspiracy theory that they're really overhyping corona deaths. But then it turns out with more than reliable sources that over half of deaths in hospitals attributed to the coronavirus were really other unrelated situations or medical conditions.
Let's clarify that it wasn't just deaths. It was 51% of all the hospitalizations that were classified as COVID related. Turned out these people were hospitalized for something else. And while they were in the hospital, it was discovered that they had COVID. So it's, and what I heard, I want your opinion on this.
My fault, but I stand corrected. But I also heard, and I don't know if this is true, so I'm going to throw it out at you, is that hospitals were more than willing to chalk it up for corona deaths because of financial considerations.
Yes, the government was making higher Medicare and Medicaid payments for COVID-related cases than they were for non-COVID related cases. So it made it easy for the hospitals to say, oh, yes, this is COVID related, so they would get more money. We've seen that over and over. There have been a number of sources that have come out to confirm that.
So maybe all the so-called whack jobs and unwashed masses, maybe they weren't so long after all. Again, shame on MSNBC and CNN. A fixation over the last 10 years in the Democratic Party has been really paying more attention to non-citizens than citizens. I have my own thoughts about that, and I'd like yours. Speaking of New York, a initiative to have non-citizens vote in New York City, and then Gavin, the genius Newsom, plan to initiate health care for non-citizens. And before I throw it out to you, I find that offensive. Healthcare for there are so many working poor that skip routine checkups that turn out to be catastrophic health events. scraping by, sacrificing to pay for health care, which is extraordinarily expensive. I find it a bunch of bullshit that this idiot, this entitled moron has the wherewithal and the gumption to propose such an initiative.
Yeah, it really is ridiculous. Several years ago, the United Way did what they called their ALICE study. And I don't remember what ALICE stood for, but it was an acronym. But the people in what they were terming the ALICE group were working people that made too much money to qualify for government aid, but not enough money to survive well on a weekly and monthly basis on their paychecks. So these are the folks that are working, getting paid, are not eligible for these government programs, and yet they have to skip prescription medications because it's a choice of, well, do I take the medication or do I feed my family? And this is not an insignificant group. And yet the Democrats would rather give away services to illegal immigrants than these American citizens that need it.
And why does America rise up? These are so-called they were the Democratic constituency. Those days are long gone. I think there's a title shift in that, and that's a whole nother show. But they were the party of the poor, the working man. Yeah, that train left the station. They're screwing the very people they so-called stand up for or represent, a la Nancy Pelosi.
It's true. They don't stand for the working poor. They don't stand for the poor at all. And I mean, let's face it, Bernie Sanders has been banging the drum for years that the Democrats are the party of the wealthy.
So they are.
Now, again,
and it's really, isn't it funny though, Dr. Lopkin, that I grew up with, it was the Country Club Republic. It's the opposite. It's hysterical.
Well, the thing is, I mean, historically, the Republicans were the party of the working class up until FDR. FDR claimed that right for the Democrats with all of the New Deal programs to get us out of the Great Depression. And with that one move, all of a sudden, the Democrats were the party of the common man. The problem is, other than Lyndon Johnson and the Kennedys, they've never been the party of the common man. This was an aberration of a couple of administrations that decided this is who we have to defend. And they put the Republicans up as, oh, they're the party of the wealthy. The Republicans were never the party of the wealthy historically. They're the ones that fought for freeing the slaves. They're the ones that fought for everybody to be working. But that's not a great story. So as time goes on, the Democrats took that narrative, and by influencing the media spread that narrative. But the fact of the matter is, when you actually look at what the Democrats have done historically, even in recent years, I mean, remember, Clinton was the one that pushed welfare reform.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats have never really been the working class party, but they've managed to grab that image through great PR and media manipulation.
But now, that is changing. Really interesting. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead,
now you're really starting to see them for who they've been all this time. And clearly they're not all that interested in the working party, in the working class.
But people are leaving the reservation. African Americans, we've talked about this before, Hispanics in the last election were, 50-50 Republican. So I think people are wising up, and I think the Democrats actually are panicking, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're pushing for that, voter rights voter initiatives, voter reforms that Biden so eloquently articulated the other day. That's really just a grab for votes. They don't really get. It has nothing to do with voter equity.
No, it's about reaching out to their base and trying to convince their base that they're actually doing something. Biden has been talking about this since Georgia passed its voter security laws. And Biden has been lying about what is in Georgia's law. And the Washington Post called him out on it, gave him 4 Pinocchios. But the party will not let go of the lie. They've been repeating it over and over again. Meanwhile, when you actually look at what's in this voter rights law that the Democrats are trying to ram through,
makes it easier.
It's rife with voter fraud.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. My correction. I'm saying the Georgia law, in a lot of ways, makes access to voting easier. The initiative, the so-called initiative with Biden, is just a grab for votes. Essentially, there's no checking. And you can actually, there's a part of it that has to do with voter integrity. You can serve food at polling places. Oh, no, there's no room for error on that one.
Well, I'm more concerned about the lack of checks and balances against absentee ballots.
That's exactly the biggest issue.
And the same day voter registration. It would be very easy for me to print up on a home computer fraudulent electric bills that have my usual bill at different addresses in different voting areas. And I could then go use that as proof that I live in that district because they're not checking it same day, and cast votes in multiple voting districts for multiple people committing voter fraud. They also are promoting voter ballot harvesting. So you're allowing somebody to go collect other people's votes and then hand them in as though they've been checked.
But it's a common thing.
With problems.
Absolutely, but it's a common theme. Allowing illegals to vote. This bullshit with the election changes. It's all about the quintessential fact is that they've lost middle America and they need to make it up. But not only have they lost middle America, they've lost traditional groups in the reservation. Hispanics, they haven't lost them, they're losing them. Hispanics, blacks, and Jews. Correct or not?
Yeah, they're losing these groups. And I mean, even a bigger problem is they can't even hold on to majorities in traditionally blue states because people are leaving those states because they've been run so badly. In fact, just this week, U-Haul announced that so many people were moving from California to Texas that they ran out of trucks in the state of California.
Doesn't surprise me, but it's extremely sad. This is a kind of a weird point, but something that I just see and it kind of bothers me. I love like old TV shows. Okay, you look at a TV shows. I think we've talked about this before from like the '60s, and you see California, the land. I mean, who wouldn't want to go there? How sad! In 60 years, it went from basically the land of milk and honey to the land of shit. I mean, 60 years isn't like, you know, in the big scheme of history, isn't that long. It went from what a great place. Everything was new. Opportunities abounded. The Dodgers moved to LA. Everything. It was amazing. And now it's a place you can't get the hell out of there fast enough.
Well, it's not even 60 years because remember, California was still well run during the Reagan administration.
True.
So it's really less than 40 years that this turnaround has occurred.
Yes, absolutely correct. In fact, after Reagan, I forgot his name. They had a Republican governor. Those days are long gone. Speaking of losing confidence, we talk about losing confidence in California and the liberal government there. People are losing confidence in the CDC in droves because essentially we've been friggin' lied to. Fauci was testifying the other day. That was a dumpster fire, Dr. Lopkin.
It really was. It's gotten to the point where Fauci is just lashing out because over and over again, his claims are being disproven. And that is called following the science. You look at a theory, you test it, and you come up with a conclusion. Fauci doesn't want any of his conclusions being tested. That's why he keeps saying, oh, when you question, if you're questioning me, if you're doubting me, you're doubting the science. It's like, no, science is about learning. And the fact of the matter is, even today, going 2 years into this pandemic, we still don't know a lot about the virus. He should have been able to adapt, but his ego got in the way. It's like, no, you can't question me. I am the science.
I think the administration is bleeding so bad that that's his best defense. I think if they were in a much healthier situation, no pun intended, he would be hasta luego, baby. He's toxic, not as toxic as Biden, but he's getting there. And speaking of getting there, inflation is at, we have to go back into the time machine, 1982. Let's see. I don't know what songs were popular then, but I'm sure if I had time, I could think of them. So 1982, 40 years ago, is when that was the last time we're reaching levels of inflation as we are now. Quite an accomplishment. Plus bare shell.
It really is. The inflation rate came out today at 7%, the highest in 40 years. And I think something that's really important is, the Biden administration keeps saying, well, inflation is going up so much because the economy is on fire. In 1982, the last time it was this high, we were heading into a recession.
But wait, by the way, I got out of college in that year, and it was recession/depression. It was a bad one.
Yeah. So, I mean, the inflation rate is not a good thing. Biden keeps touting the fact that wages have been going up, except wages are going up 4.8%, according to the latest jobs report that came out last week. You put a 4.8% wage growth and a 7% inflation rate, it means your money is actually worth less. So your wages aren't covering it. You're actually having real wage loss.
No question. But overall, in the bigger picture, I'd love your opinion. I'm sure our listeners would as well. Don't you really get an impression, even though it's only been a year, that we have an administration that's just grasping for straws and essentially flailing? And exponentially every month.
Yes, and everything he does causes him to flail more. It started with the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And then you had everything going on in the southern border. And by the way, in that Fauci CDC testimony in front of the Senate yesterday, or in front of Congress, you found out that over $1.5 billion was diverted from COVID relief by the administration to help deal with what was going on at the southern border, which was a crisis of Biden's own making. All Biden had to do was leave all of the policies alone, and he would have been in better shape. But every time he goes on, he fails miserably. And each time he goes, well, I can't do anything about that now, so I'm going to move on to this. And he fails more spectacularly each time he does that.
But who's his chief of staff? I did know his name at one time. It's not important. I don't really care, and I don't think our listeners do as well. But like, he is so, for someone that has spent his entire adult life in government, who either, I don't think he even knows what's going on. So let's just say his advisors. Let's talk about the voting rights initiative. It has no chance of passing, yet he's expending political capital on something that's a no-win. I mean, go figure.
Well, it does show just how out of touch Biden and the Democratic leaders are. Because, and you can see this on the news every night, because they'll go to Biden or Jen Psaki and they say, yes, negotiations are going on with Joe Manchin. He's coming around. We're going to be able to pass this. And then they'll cut to Joe Manchin, and Joe Manchin will talk to reporters and say, no, there are no negotiations. This isn't going anywhere. And they refuse to listen to him. They keep thinking, oh, we can change his mind. Now it's coming out. It's not just Manchin who's blocking the filibuster from being removed. It's Manchin, it's Sinema, and there's 3 other Democrats who have been saying, no, we are not voting to remove the filibuster. But Biden and the leadership are out of touch.
Yeah, out of touch and incompetent. I've never seen anything like it, but we've already talked about that before. Something we haven't talked about. It's making the airwaves and the social media. I don't know if it'll happen. Hillary-Trump rematch. It'll be the Thriller in Manila. Ali Frazier again. I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say if Hillary does decide to run, there is no way she's going to win the primary. The party has had it with her. She is quite possibly the only person in the party that's just as toxic as Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. They're not going to support her. She is done, but she just can't accept it.
No, I agreed. And the only thing I would say to that is in her mind, because she lived for being president. She's never been over it. I'm sure she's drinking a lot of Chardonnay. I wouldn't want to get her bill. And also I wouldn't want to get her bill for her psychotherapy. She never got over this. And it's funny, though, she's trying to triangulate and basically knowing that the party has gone way too far to the left. She came out in some interview, I don't know where it was, I don't really care, and basically saying that, well, we need more of a level head and more centrist, even though last election, when she was involved, she went as left as anyone.
Right, but even saying that, just a few days ago, she announced that, yes, she would support getting rid of the filibuster so that they could get this voter rights bill passed. So
she doesn't know.
She's not kidding anybody. And the fact of the matter is, this is all bad for Biden-Harris. Because, and I think we might have mentioned this last week, it doesn't happen often, but there have been 3 times in history where the incumbent president was given a serious primary. In every case, the incumbent held on to the nomination but lost the general election.
Very good point. I believe it was Ford, Carter, and I don't know the other. I don't know the other.
Bush. It was George H.W. Bush.
Very good. So it's the final bit, which shows you the deterioration of the whole Biden-Harris presidency. Trump, who has many warts of his own, in a Rasmussen poll, not, Billy Bob's, Daily News, beats Biden by over 10 points. That speaks volumes.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I mean, the Democrats are losing versus generic Republicans. They're losing versus Trump. The fact of the matter is, this has been an administration of failure. They have failed everything. And the The Democrats are looking at this going, you know what? This is not what we voted for. We did not vote for a leftist president. If we'd wanted that, we'd have elected Bernie Sanders. We wanted to elect a centrist, somebody who was going to unite the country and move us forward. And Biden has done everything against that. So his own party is like, no, enough is enough. You are going to see, and with the infighting in the party, you've got the progressives yelling that they're not going to support centrist candidates in the midterms. So they're eating themselves alive.
Yes, they are. I guess my final thought on the issue is when anyone says Biden did this, Biden did that, I always push back. I don't think he's done anything. I think that literally, if people knew how bad the situation really is, I'm talking his mental capabilities, their jaw would drop. I think they do everything they can just to get him to do a 10-minute teleprompter update. I think he's been taken over by the far left, Bernie Sanders, AOC, that whole wing of the party, and I believe he just says, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I really do believe that.
Oh, I have no doubt that his handlers are taking care of everything. They're the ones that are making the decisions. And I think what was really telling, as most people know, every year the president submits to a physical exam to make sure he's healthy. And in his last physical exam, they omitted testing his mental capacity.
Surprise, surprise. Well, Dr. Lopkin, great edition of Carnivore Radio, Carnivore Bites, and we're on we record every Wednesday, and we're also available in numerous outlets, aren't we?
You can find us at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website. You can find us in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, the new Xvadio YouTube channel, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin.
See you next time.